This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
The Mets have hired Carlos Mendoza to be the manager now. This is still reported. It's not officially official just yet. But John Heyman, Joel Sherman, Jeff Pass, and all the major reports saying that the Mets are going to hire Carlos Mendoza as their manager. Like I said, the Mets haven't made an announcement just yet, but, we've heard from Brian Cashman talking about it. Obviously, I know David Stern's trying not to talk too much because it's not set in stone yet, but it's pretty much a done deal here. But Carlos Mendoza, let's get into his resume. Coached the Yankees organization since 2009. Yankees bench coach for the last 4 years. Casey, what was your reaction to this hire?
Well, it was twofold, Anthony. One, I was surprised at first because it's not Craig Counsell. And I posted this out on Twitter, the artist formerly known, if you want to use X, whatever is easiest for you. Thank you, Elon. I posted at the time that, clearly it was something that came down to a job Counsell didn't want if the Mets didn't hire him, because there was no way that David Stearns or anybody else breathing, and no offense to Carlos Mendoza's family, would want him or probably anybody else that was remotely available more than they'd want Craig Counsell. So that was the first thing. Once we got beyond that and we found out that Counsell was going to the Cubs for the money he was going and the fact that he never really had an intention or desire to come be part of all that is the New York Mets and the New York media, then it made a lot more sense, because where Met fans make me laugh is the same guy who was the biggest reason for all the culture change and they won 101 games was then the guy everybody thought in Buck Showalter they needed to get rid of as soon as possible, and they needed a culture change. And then those same people are now upset that it's Carlos Mendoza. Even some of them I've seen tweet and post out that if they knew this, they would have kept Buck Showalter. No Met fan is ever going to be happy. At the end of the day, this is a guy who's well-respected. He's a baseball lifer. He's a guy who is knowledgeable in the game. And everybody that I've talked to over the years has always talked glowingly about him. I said this recently, but another guy who fit that category before he ever became a manager, who down here where I live in Atlanta, they were like, yeah, I don't know if Brian Snitker is really the guy. What the heck is that? Okay, great. He's been around a long time. But when Snit got the job, there were a lot of people that were wondering what being respected or being a baseball lifer even meant. And now look what he's done with this team over the years that he's been here. Is that going to be Carlos Mendoza? I'm not sure. But everybody I've ever talked to speaks glowingly about him. And I ask Met fans who are listening, think about this clearly. Who else did you want? Who that was available did you have? Did you want Stephen Vogt to get the job? You wouldn't have been okay with that either. So unfortunately, it was Counsell or bust, and it ended up being bust.
And you know what? The thing to me is I was always 50-50 on Counsell being here. You read between the lines and what was talked about. He's very ingrained in the community of Milwaukee. His family is, his kids go to school around there. He's big family life in that area. And the thought process to me was always, I don't know. I don't think he's going to come here. I was very surprised that he went to the Cubs. Originally, I thought he was going to stay in Milwaukee. I'm sure Milwaukee's also surprised that he decided to hightail to 90 miles down the road there in Chicago. But I was never 100% sure he was going to want to come here. And, a lot of people talk about the ties to the Yankees with Carlos Mendoza. That doesn't really faze me that much. And the fact that he's under Aaron Boone. It's hard to think about this, as a Met fan and sometimes as a Yankee fan, but, Aaron Boone, if you look at his resume as a manager, pretty successful. 2 ALCS titles, 2 ALCS appearances, and they've won 100 games 2 or 3 times in his time here. I think Met fans would love to at least see that in succession, the way that Aaron Boone has done that. And I think also was talked about, being under Rob Thompson, who's the manager of the Phillies, and look at the success that Rob Thompson's had. So, the pedigree is there. Hopefully it works out for Carlos Mendoza. And I saw some quotes that I'm going to read out here from Aaron Boone on SNY. He says he's the real deal. He's grown in the job. He has earned opportunities, smelling the wins over the last month, that he thought that he was going to get one of these jobs because people were seeing what he's seen. The only thing people can say is that he doesn't have the experience, but he has managed in the minors and he has been a bench coach. He has managed in the minors. He has done winter ball. He has more than paid his dues. I think also goes on to say he's very strong, very confident, but also very open minded and in the tune with everything in the game, dealing with players. He's not afraid to debate talk. He has the ability to push back on anything, but he knows he doesn't know everything. And now Kevin Reese, who runs player development in the Yankees, says he's a baseball lifer, very knowledgeable about the game as the game has changed. He's not afraid to hold people accountable. That's probably one of the keys to being a good manager is that he has that in him. He's going to set standards. That's something he did under long-term player development executive Mark Newman in player development with the Yankees, and then kept it with him as he went on. Brian Cashman at the GM meeting says, I cannot tell you the amount of feedback he's gotten that he cannot believe this guy hasn't gotten a manager's job yet. And we've seen stuff like this before. It kind of reminds me of Joe Espada a little bit. You know, Joe Espada was the thing last year where everyone was talking about he's going to get a job and he's the next thing. It hasn't happened. It might happen with the Astros, so we'll wait and see on what happens there. But you know, as soon as he puts on that Mets jersey, and I'm sure you're in agreement with me, he's got our 100% support. I mean, you have to. It's a new hire. We should be excited to see what difference he can make, if he can make a difference. And now it's really up to David Stearns and trusting David Stearns to build a roster. Everyone wanted David Stearns to be here right around, even before August, right? We always talked about David Stearns last year, and then they didn't give us time to talk with him because Milwaukee didn't want to do that. But we all wanted David Stearns to be here. Now he's here, and now we got to trust the process and, you know, trust what he's going to bring to this franchise. He's a Mets fan. He's grown up a Mets fan. So I think we got to give him the benefit of doubt here that, one, not only maybe he didn't get the guy because it's Craig Counsell, but maybe he's gotten the guy now that will, you know, work with him hand in hand, which we really didn't see with Epler and Buck Showalter.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, the mention of Rob Thompson is a prophetic one because I think if you go back to it, he was a longtime bench coach who was never getting opportunities, who was eventually going to be a manager. And why has it taken so long? And look what Topper's done in Philadelphia. On Aaron Boone, you know, people could say whatever they want. Back-to-back 100-win seasons when he came in. And I'm a little biased. Boone had been a friend for years. He won my fantasy league that I have 4 times before he went into managing the Yankees and since has retired his championship belt. He is a guy who is extremely knowledgeable, has made some mistakes, hasn't been perfect. But what Met fans and people who are dopes and don't want to pay attention don't understand is if you go take that lineup they were running out there every day for most of the year, it's not winning games anywhere. It wouldn't matter if Bruce Bochy had that lineup. That wasn't the lineup he had in Texas. You need to have personnel. Same Bruce Bochy, who is brilliant and the best manager I ever covered, one of the greatest of all time. When he managed the Giants, was the best bullpen handler in baseball. The last year, he was the reason that we have, literally, he is the reason we have the 3-batter rule. In one game against the Cubs, he switched 5 pitchers, I think, in 5 consecutive at-bats in a game in a playoff series because he couldn't trust anyone. Those names, Sergio Romo, Casilla, Affeldt, all the same names. You need personnel that succeed. So no matter who it is. The last thing is Met fans are going to eventually understand or learn your personnel. It ain't good enough. It's not good enough. The team isn't that good. Buck Showalter made some mistakes. He's not the reason why they weren't good this past year. So if you asked me, would I rather have Buck Showalter or Carlos Mendoza? I'd rather have Buck Showalter. He's a better manager. He's a more seasoned manager. He was the right manager a year before that. I don't think they should have fired Buck Showalter. I don't think that he had really much of anything to do with what went on, to be quite honest. However, other than the fact that David Stearns, a new guy to your point, and there, wanted some new blood in there. If you're going to trust David Stearns, and this was his first hire, even though we all know it was the guy he wanted second most because he wanted Craig Counsell, then we have to wait and see and let it play out. At the end of the day, the personnel, it's just not good enough. You're not going to win a ton of games next year, whether it's Carlos Mendoza or if Dusty Baker turned around and changed his mind and managed your ball club. Met fans better start letting that sink in real quick. Otherwise, they're going to be disappointed no matter who's managing the team.